Howard Thomas Brady has an MSc from Northern Illinois University in the US and a PhD from Macquarie University in Australia, in Sydney. His research used microscopic fossils to chart the past climatic environments and the geological history of McMurdo Sound and Ross Sea regions of Antarctica. There is more, but I want to cut because I could go on for too long. In 2011, for his contribution to Antarctic research, Northern Illinois University presented Dr. Howard Brady with the Distinguished Alumnus Scientist of the Year Award. They said Dr. Brady is internationally recognized for his identification and naming of several species of algae currently used to help trace the climate history of Antarctica. And on he went. At least on it goes. So that is his background. They're his qualifications. The book that he has written is called Mirrors and Mazes, a guide through climate change debate. Dr. Howard Brady, good morning.
Very good morning, Leighton, from Canberra in Australia.
Yeah, I spent 2 years in Canberra a long time ago at ANU,
It's pretty hot here tonight.
Where I was a dropout in law, not science, I might add. Now, tell me why, with all the books that are available, why did you decide to write Mirrors and Mazes?
Basically, I have a house on a little beach village in Australia where suddenly the council started to put lines in everyone's houses as to what would happen to sea level. And values dropped by millions of dollars. It didn't affect our house, but it affected many others. And then I thought, I'm going to go into this really thoroughly. I'm a field geologist, and I think I'm a very good scientist. And so Bob Carter, who was a New Zealander who came to Australia and wrote a book on climate, stayed with me. And after talking with Bob, I decided to write a book that ordinary people could follow, which they could give to their counsellors, etc., to read and say, listen, if you say that this is happening to sea level, this is not happening. Sea level is going up slowly. It's not accelerating. There's no evidence of that. If you say the storms are getting worse, you read, I think, Chapter 5. Look at all these graphs. There's just more people to get damaged by storms. They're not getting any worse. And basically, the climate models have been on steroids for 30 years or 40 years. It's an absolute mess. And I enjoyed writing the book. When I wrote it, I had a real estate agent, a plumber, and 2 professors check it because I wanted to make it understandable for the ordinary people. So it was a lot of fun. And I've had now comments from all over the world. And in America now, the book has taken off in the last 2 weeks. But I've enjoyed writing it. I think it's a contribution, hopefully, to show ordinary people this climate debate is an absolute mess.
So why has it taken off in the States in the last couple of weeks? It's new. That must be the reason.
No, not so much. We decided to release a Kindle edition. The second edition only came out this year. But Professor Will Happer, who's actually advised Trump and is a world-famous physicist on lasers, etc., he loved the book. And then Willie Soon, who's a world expert on the sun, who says we've been ignoring the role of the sun in climate at the Harvard-Smithsonian Center for Astrophysics. He also backed the book, and that's got Americans talking. And only 2 days ago, I did a podcast which apparently is going to go to 130,000 people in the States for the Heartland Institute. So suddenly the Americans have got interested because there's a lot of books on climate around, but they're normally on particular issues. And this was written as a summary for the ordinary man in the street.
Now, only a couple of days ago, NASA has published that the sun is going very quiet and cooling.
Well, the trouble with the sun is that we know that in the 1600s there was no sunspots and it was very cold. And then we had another area of lower sunspots between 1800 and 1820. And it looks like the number of sunspots is dropping again. And the Russians in particular, since 1995, are predicting that this would happen and we'd have a cold snap around the 2040 type period. Now, that's not definite, but these theories have to be looked at. And why look at global warming when we also have to look at global cooling? The Russians think that cooling could affect the wheat beds in Saskatchewan and the Belarus and the Ukraine and have a big effect on their agriculture.
Indeed. Now, you've broken the book down. You've broken it down into chapters, obviously, but subheadings, and each subheading, well, each article, if you like, or the paragraphs that follow the subheadings, you've kept it to a minimum, shall we say. I mean, each one goes a page pretty much at most.
Yes. Yes.
Although I see that Messages from Human History, which starts out by referring to the NASA satellites, goes a little further than that, goes a couple of pages. But bottom line is, as you say, you have kept it within the reach of ordinary mortals like me and the rest of us.
Yes, I've tried to. And I noticed the other day you were talking about this so-called consensus, There's no such consensus. There's a German site, which is in English also, called No Tricks, and it lists 500 peer-reviewed papers this year alone questioning this whole theory of catastrophic global warming. I don't expect people to understand it, but if they go to that site, they can see, yes, there are all these peer-reviewed articles coming out from all over the world questioning this whole business. And in New Zealand, you might remember, I think Professor Barrett and others got out this film, of catastrophe, Thin Ice, I think it was called. Well, they're on thin ice now. There is no catastrophe we're facing. And as a matter of fact, if CO2 increases, thank God it is, because we need it to spare our agriculture as the world's population increases.
All right. So when the claim is made that the science is settled, tell us why it's not.
Well, first of all, in the last 150 years, there's been 70 years of pauses when CO2 went up and temperatures went sideways or even down. Between 1945 and 75, the CIA was warning the American president of a coming ice age. The correlation between CO2 and temperature is very poor. And when you go to world geological history, we've had ice ages where CO2 has been 10 times that of today. So if CO2 is the knob, which Barrett and his people say is thing controlling climate, how can there be an ice age with CO2 10 times today? The whole thing is not settled, and CO2 is not the knob controlling temperature.
All right. So in Australia, you've got governments in South Australia and Victoria, for instance, pouring buckets of money into alternative power sources, not doing too flash, actually, as it happens, and the price is going through the roof. But is there good cause to do that, even if there is, as some of us believe, no man-made climate change?
Yes, there is, but you've got to be careful. We can't rely on oil, gas and coal forever. We do need other alternative sources of energy. But if we subsidise them in a real rush on the basis we're going to save the world's climate, then we're only going to bankrupt companies. We're not going to do anything. In South Australia, the electricity price is around 45 cents a kilowatt hour. It's the highest in the world. I think Germany and Denmark come second, but South Australia is winning.
Very good.
So we need to develop solar and wind and all these other things, and maybe some form of safe nuclear. But there's no panic. There's not a climate panic involved. There is just prudence involved. We can't rely on things, particularly that rely on transport all over the world. If the transport at the sea gets disrupted, some countries will be in dire trouble. So we do need to develop renewables. There's nothing wrong with that. My book says, no, we need them, but we don't have to panic and subsidise them to the blazes and blow up all these coal-fired stations.
All right. I need to take a break. And then I just want to come back and get your opinion on the declaration yesterday by the New Zealand government to establish a commission and to head for a carbon-neutral economy by 2050. Dr. Howard Brady, the author of Mirrors and Mazes, back after the break. Dr. Howard Brady is the author of Mirrors and Mazes. You see, we have an Australian audience. The new government in New Zealand has announced yesterday, as you'd be aware, that they're establishing a climate commission, etc., etc. And the goal is to make New Zealand carbon neutral by 2050. A, is there any point in that? B, will it achieve anything? And C, if it does achieve anything, what will it mean?
Well, I think New Zealand, you're lucky you do have some hydro, you do have a bit of geothermal, but if you decide to get rid of gas, which produces CO2, and a bit of coal that you use, God help you, your electricity prices are going to go to the roof. It's going to affect the youth unemployment and everything else. And unfortunately, these politicians, and some of them very sincere, they've been trapped by this simplistic argument. If CO2 goes up, temperature goes up. That argument is absolute rubbish. But they've been trapped by that. They think they're doing good. They're not going to change the world climate one iota. And all they're going to do is raise your electricity prices. They're not going to achieve anything.
Is there more? Is there more than that? Do you have any shall we say agreeable thoughts with the theory that this is all about power and money, and that it's being utilised to centralise authority?
Well, some people, I think, are very genuine. They really think it's affecting temperature, and they are not involved in the politics of it. But there are other people around the world who really saw this as a chance to get a world government. But if they could have a world issue and they could get the United Nations to get control of every country so they had a world issue to use, they could use this for a centralised world government. The guy behind it was a Canadian called Maurice Strong, and there are people who are now really pushing that. One of these guys is Hans Joachim Schellenhuber, who is advising Angela Merkel running this Potsdam Institute, even advising the Vatican, if you can believe it. And he thinks the world should be ruled by 7 wise men. So some of these climate enthusiasts are trying to achieve a world government. And my God, I think we all like our little independence, and I'm sure the Kiwis want their own independence.
Yeah, but it seems that there is a growing number of people who either don't care or are certainly in favour of it and think we'll all be winners if that's what happens. But let's get back to the science. What would this pathway lead us to if it was achieved and by 2050 we were carbon neutral? What would be gained from it?
Nothing in terms of affecting climate. If you have got the economics down, you'll be fine, but I don't think you will, and it's going to be very expensive. And so I don't know what's going to achieve anything. I'm sorry, simple as that.
No, don't be sorry. It's that's basically the honest answer.
And I think Ian Plimer's got a book out just recently on this renewable rubbish, and he's a professor of geology at Adelaide, but that's just concentrating on the renewable side of it. I've concentrated on the simple science so people can see the science is rubbish.
It's a very good book for people like me and others who really just want to cut to the quick and be able to comprehend.
If you go to the website, you'll get also some radio interviews, and we'll put this interview on the website so people can hear it. But the website's been very helpful too at mirrorsandmazes.com.au. And I think hopefully some people get some more information from that website.
Okay, I've only got I've only got a minute or so left, really. I just want to ask you this. You mentioned Bob Carter. Bob Carter was a good friend. Been on the program a number of times, and his demise was premature and a sad loss. But it bothers me somewhat that a lot of the established scientists are in fact dying. There's been a number. And Augie Howe was another one, for instance, who I'm sure you're aware of. But the question I've got is it possible that with the education system being as it is now, in all fields, but science for our purposes, that the newer generations will be so, shall we say, falsely guided through their education that the cause is lost?
I don't think so. I think the young people are beginning to realise they've been conned. I gave a talk at the University of New South Wales in September to 110 roughly postgraduate students in engineering and medicine. They gave me a standing ovation. I think there's hope. I think our young people will gradually see through this mess.
All right. There I need to leave it, but I appreciate it very much. Thank you for your time, and we may well talk again.
Much,
and if you're ever here, if you're ever in Auckland, and I'm sure you will be at some stage, you'll be a guest in the studio as well. Thank you.
I'd love to come. Thank you.
Dr. Howard Brady, and the book is called Mirrors and Mazes. It's a new book, and let me tell you, it's a very good one for kids, young people, and adults alike. It's very easy to understand, and it's full of fact and detail.